because of mental health disease and alcoholism.
Yeah.
The rest of it is illegal drugs. They're
Yeah.
junkies that have burned up all the resources,
Yeah.
and they end up homeless.
On October 1st, Governor Ron DeSantis' anti-homeless law will be in full effect in the state of Florida. However, the homeless population is telling me that there are neither enough prisons or homeless shelters in the state of Florida to address the massive population of homelessness that the state has. Besides that, many homeless people are telling me outright that most of these homeless programs require the individuals to take a drug test, and about 95% of the homeless population in the Tampa Bay area is not going to qualify for these shelter programs because they are dealing foremost more than a homeless problem with an addiction problem. And you can turn off Fox News because the state of Florida's drug overdose death rate is higher than California, higher than Washington, and higher than Oregon. Even official sources on the West Coast put the addiction rate among the homeless population at about 37%, while official estimates in Florida claim about 87%. Now, I actually work with the homeless, and in some counties it's as low as 40%, but here in the Tampa Bay area, Bradenton, Sarasota, 95% of the homeless people self-admit to being addicts, and those that say they don't put a question mark over their head. Pasco County, Florida recently acquired a property, and it will be a tolerance allowed homeless shelter, which means that people that have registered offender status and addiction problems will be allowed to go to this shelter. I mean, if we were really going to dive into the real reason why Florida is plagued of homelessness, it isn't even the cost of housing for these individuals. It is the fact that most of them are addicted. Florida's drug overdose death rate is higher than any of the larger states. Texas, New York, California, large states with large populations simply don't have this freaking problem. The state of Florida is putting more effort into covering up the real information about homelessness than they are into actually fixing the problem. The first step to correcting Florida's homeless population problem would be for officials to accept that the real number of homelessness is actually closer to 100,000. But the state of Florida is infinitely focused on trying to reduce on paper the homeless population because it's going to make them be on par with states like California officially, a title that they don't want because it shows the hypocrisy, since the only thing the officials in the state of Florida have done regarding homelessness is say, hey, look over there, it's worse than California. But now in reality, the state of Florida has a much more serious problem, because when you start to look at the analytics among the homeless population, you'll realize that the homeless population in Washington, Oregon, and California are not as chronic as the ones in Florida. When I was in Monterey, California, I realized something. I was sitting in a line getting some groceries, and I realized that out of the 5 people in this line, 6 of them were homeless. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but I realized that this grocery store was full of homeless people buying groceries. Now, if you live in the state of Florida, have you ever seen a homeless person here getting groceries? The homeless population in California is, for 1, young, 2, has a sleeping bag, 3, has a book bag, and they're doing it recreationally. They're doing it as a lifestyle choice in the mild weather that California has to offer. Some of them were students. A lot of them were young people saving money for their future. A lot of them were doing it like the van life, lifestyle type of situation. In other words, they're not the Florida homeless population, addicted with diseases and infections, criminal records, registered offenders. When you compare not just the numbers, but when you compare the composition of Florida's homeless population, yeah, California has a lot of homeless people. They're young kids living out of their book bags so they can save money for their future. Florida's homeless population is a complete zombie apocalypse of addicts, zombies, junkies, people with infections, diseases, extensive criminal records. You just can't compare the homeless population of California, that is kind of just individuals who are not paying rent, versus Florida's zombie apocalypse. Even if we believe official numbers on the West Coast, the addiction rate among the homeless is half what it is in the state of Florida. Only goes to show that you just can't compare somebody young and healthy and living homeless in Monterey, California because they have a job and are saving money for their future to somebody homeless in Florida because they're a registered offender on Fent. It goes beyond just looking at the numbers of homelessness and looking at the actual composition of Florida's homeless people. How are these individuals going to go into shelters when most of these shelters don't allow people who are addicts, don't allow people with criminal records, and definitely don't allow people that are registered offenders? Some of these are even registered predators. That's like an enhancement to that charge. Realistically, Florida's homeless population is about 100,000, which is roughly the state's inmate population. In other words, there are neither enough shelters nor enough prison cells for all of Florida's homeless population. Thus, this is going to help a percentage of people homeless in Florida to find a place to live, but it is by no means going to resolve the problem for a few specific reasons. Because these homeless shelters are going to be plagued with those types of individuals, most people who are homeless are going to avoid homeless shelters because they're too dangerous. This is already a problem, and if you've watched my interviews with the homeless people in Florida, a lot of them will tell you, dude, I'm not going to go to these homeless shelters. They're complete freaking madhouses. If you've watched my YouTube videos about these homeless shelters, I've done videos about these homeless shelters. It didn't get a lot of views because people are not interested in this topic. But the reality is that just about every single time I go to these homeless shelters, we see fights. These are dangerous places, and particularly the female population doesn't want to end up in these shelters. They are simply too dangerous, and the individuals that live there too predatory. Most homeless people are not going to go to a homeless shelter. They would almost rather go to prison. A lot of these homeless people are complete outlaws and junkies. They don't want a homeless shelter. They want to live out in the woods with their needles, their crack pipes, their dealers, their hustlers. These people are completely entrenched in a lifestyle of crime, and it doesn't matter if it's made illegal or not. These are individuals who are outlaws. They're not going to conform to laws and regulations. They're going to continue living on the streets because they're freaking street people, bro. And even furthermore, after talking to some of these individuals, they're telling me that if they're going to get arrested for sleeping on a sidewalk, they might as well break into a house. That's right. They are planning right now, the homeless population, a good percentage of them, are going to start squatting in empty houses. If you're going to get arrested for sleeping, you might as well sleep in a mansion. So if you have property in Florida that's vacant, a lot of people will buy a house in Florida. You know, the snowbirds, the houses that are empty half the year. If you are owning property in Florida, a mansion in Florida by the beach, guess where the homeless people are going to go live now? They're telling me, hey, bro, if I'm going to get arrested for sleeping on a sidewalk, I might as well get arrested for sleeping in a mansion, because the punishment for squatting is now almost on par with the punishment for sleeping on a sidewalk. Florida's homeless population is going to start squatting more. They're telling me they're going to do this, man. So if you're one of these wealthy individuals who has a second home in the state of Florida, I hope you're listening to what I'm saying. The homeless population is saying, hey, dude, why are we going to go to jail for sleeping on a sidewalk when we can go to jail for sleeping in a mansion? If the criminal punishment is the same, why does it matter? Of course, a lot of homeless people are not going to go break into a mansion right now because it's just not worth it. But if you're going to get arrested for sleeping on a sidewalk, you might as well sleep in a freaking empty mansion. They're everywhere in Florida. So here's a problem that is plaguing nobody except people who own commercial real estate in the state of Florida. And if you are listening, listen carefully. Homelessness is affecting predominantly people who own commercial real estate in the state of Florida. Now that problem is going to start to affect, that's right, residential properties. Every time the state of Florida makes a new law or regulation, I warn you and I tell you, hey, this is what's going to happen. It looks like people who have, commerce in Florida are making their commercial problems a residential problem. How many times have I told you guys, hey, you think these new changes that are coming to Florida are going to help you, but they're actually going to screw you? And I've been doing this. I've been the first and premier YouTuber. How many times have I told you guys, hey guys, this is a problem that currently lies on the big developers and investors, and they're making it a problem that's going to affect you? How many times? Everybody in the comments, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. 3 or 4 years later, now you're starting to see everything that I've been telling you guys happen exactly the way I've been saying it. So I hope you're listening. This is a problem that developers and builders and people who have commercial real estate in Florida are pawning off on people like me and you. Yes, these new laws about homelessness in the state of Florida aren't going to free me and you from homelessness. They're going to free big developers, Walmart, Lowe's, Publix. Those people aren't going to have to worry about homelessness. They're grabbing the homeless problem that now solely resides in commercial districts, and they're putting it in residential areas. Look up the homeless place that feeds people, the food pantry in Bonita Springs, Florida. They literally grabbed the homeless people that were spread out through all the commercial districts in Bonita Springs. They put the homeless shelter purely in the heart of a residential community. This has already been happening in the state of Florida for years now, where they grab these homeless shelters and put them predominantly in Hispanic or black neighborhoods. These new laws on homelessness are going to grab the homeless people that are now a plague to the commercial districts in Florida and make it a residential problem. When it came to insurances in Florida, I was the foremost person telling you this is going to happen. I've been at the forefront of telling you how all these new laws and changes that are happening in Florida are ultimately going to screw over who? You, the resident of Florida. These homeless laws are not going to stop homelessness in Florida. These homeless laws are going to make a public commercial property problem a residential problem. You can expect the homeless people to leave these commercial districts that are being patrolled by law enforcement and end up in residential neighborhoods, your backyard, your shed, because these laws are not to protect the residents of Florida. These laws are to protect the big developers, the commercial real estate. The state of Florida would never hurt us. Insurance rates are going up. New laws and regulations are going in. People like you are having to move to other states because they can't afford the houses they bought in Florida. All this time I've been telling you and warning you, hey dude, these laws are actually going to make life harder for you. But you are too stupid to listen. Hey, homeless person in Florida, if you're going to get arrested for sleeping on the sidewalk, where are you going to go? Oh, an empty house. There's, let's take a look. 30% of these houses in Florida are snowbird houses. If you're going to get arrested for being homeless, you might as well get arrested for freaking living in a mansion. This is what people in Florida that are homeless are telling me. Obviously, trespassing is illegal. A lot of the homeless population are forced to live against the law, not because they want to be outlaws, but because homelessness brings them to the point where they don't have an option. So now you're going to grab homeless people that are not criminally minded, and you're going to make them outlaws, and then they're going to have to expand upon the options of, okay, I'm not trying to break the law, but if I'm going to be against the law, what law options do I have as a criminal? It's going to force the homeless population to have to look at options within the realm of criminality to resolve their issue. A lot of them, by choice, are going to pick that lifestyle because they don't want reform, and others are going to say, well, I don't want to go to jail, but if I'm going to go to jail either way, I don't have an option. I'm already being forced to break the law. What options do I have while breaking the law to resolve my problem? You're going to see a lot of these homeless individuals that are now panhandling and just kind of living out in the woods become a real nuisance to people. Not so much to businesses, not so much to commercial properties. They're going to become a nuisance to people like me and you. A lot of them are going to opt for heavier criminal activity. Crap, if I'm going to get arrested for sleeping on a sidewalk, I might as well commit a crime and try to stay at a hotel tonight. Mark my words, you're going to see homeless people start to do some crazy crap when this law comes into place. You're going to see individuals start breaking into houses to live in them. You're going to see homeless people going more towards crime and delinquency since they're already within a criminal state. They might as well make it more convenient for themselves. You're going to grab all these people that have mental illnesses and addictions. You're going to put a lot of pressure on these individuals. A lot of them are going to crash out. I'm talking to these people. They're telling me when this law comes into place, I'm gonna crash out, dude. I don't give a crap if they lock me up for the rest of my life. A lot of these homeless people are telling me when this law comes into place, they're crash test dummies. If they're gonna get arrested for sleeping on a sidewalk, they might as well get arrested for doing anything. Let me illustrate and reiterate what I said just to irritate those who don't want to listen. This is a problem affecting commercial real estate property. It's going to be a problem affecting you in residential areas. Mark my words, these homeless people are not going to get arrested for sleeping on a sidewalk. They're going to get arrested for sleeping inside an empty house. A lot of them are going to get their crap together and they're going to find a better living arrangement, because after all, for many of this homeless population, it is an issue of choice. They choose to be homeless. Matter of fact, when I interview, a lot of them will tell you, I'm here because I want to be here. If the laws are stricter, a percentage of those people are going to choose to get their crap together. There's no doubt about that. A lot of homeless people are already making arrangements for this. Even the people living in homelessness understand that this really isn't a viable long-term option for them and that they really do need to do something better with themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. We want them to get their crap together. We want them to find better living solutions. The problem is that this doesn't seem to be a problem to resolve homelessness. Both now California and Oregon, all these other states have joined the same idea, which is just simply to outlaw, ban, and just try to make the problem disappear. And now these municipalities have the backing of the Supreme Court. They don't care if it's not compassionate. They don't care if it's inhumane. They want to make this problem go away. Not because they care about the people, because as politicians and states, they don't want to have the reputation that homelessness is bringing to them. In other words, homeless people don't have friends politically. Everybody is against them. Nobody really wants this problem. So just to summarize today's video, there are not enough homeless shelters in the state of Florida. These homeless shelters have specific requirements that a lot of these people simply cannot meet. Prisons and jails don't have enough capacity for all these homeless people. There's really nowhere to put these people. Homeless shelters have regulations that most of these homeless people don't qualify for. At the core of Florida's homeless situation is mental disorders, physical ailments, the lack of access to health care that's left a lot of these people with no option but to be homeless. Until you resolve the healthcare problem, which there's no plan in the state of Florida or in the country to address this issue properly, until you address the issue with addiction and the fact that you have all these registered offenders in the state of Florida, they are the core of the homeless population. The people that become homeless and find themselves with any other type of homeless situation due to health, economic constraints, those people can get help. But what about the chronically homeless people in Florida, the addicted, the registered offenders? These people are going to continue a lifestyle of crime. The addicts themselves, they don't want reform. They want to continue living on the streets. Already, a lot of Florida's homeless population is squatting in houses that are empty. This has been a problem that's been exposed in Cape Coral, a few other municipalities in Florida. We've seen this on the news, homeless people squatting on properties. If the punishment for squatting and the punishment for sleeping on the sidewalk are the same or similar, we can assume that a lot of homeless people are going to start breaking into properties, residential properties in your neighborhood. I've been telling you guys for a while now that these new changes in laws in the state of Florida continue to benefit people with deep pockets. They're not going to say this on camera, but behind the scenes, homeless people are telling me, if I'm going to get arrested for sleeping on a sidewalk, I might as well get arrested for sleeping in a mansion.